Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over the market, let's go over Tesla, and let's figure out what we can expect moving forward. Today was the last day of the month, of course. Tomorrow we start a fresh month of August, which of course for Tesla is more often than not positive. Actually went up to 64% for whatever reason, but nonetheless, definitely more of a positive than a negative month. I mean, especially compared to September and October following that, which are extremely poor. Now, with that being said, if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. It does help a lot. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. My membership section is down below live now, if you're interested, where I share all these intraday thoughts on Tesla as it moves throughout the day, giving you inside info, I guess behind the scenes info, or whatever you want to call it, pretty much live. The link is down below if you're interested for that as well. Now, moving right into a Tesla closing the day, for the most part flat, but still ended up finding a way to close about 0.5% in the green, which compared to the market is an ever so slight outperformance, but very, very minimal, largely following the market, I would say. Nothing too completely, worth noting, I guess. Now, there's a few things to note. First and foremost, let's get the few big things out of the way. There's three big things I really want to talk. Four like very large, kind of very important things that I personally want to talk about. The first of which is going to be the 21 EMA. The 21 EMA, of course, as you can see, is now below us. Right, we had several issues closing above it, but now we officially have come back down to it, supposedly acting as a support now, and we are closing just ever so barely above it, but it's still not super duper convincing, but still better than obviously being under it. So that's something to note, right? This is potentially some slight bullishness forming right here. The MACD is starting to slowly curl back up to the upside ever so slightly. So it's, a little bit of bullishness kind of on the horizon, if that makes sense, right? So it's not super obvious, it's not in our face, but it's kind of like on the horizon way over there, and it might be coming our way. You know what I mean? So take it with a grain of salt still. Second thing that's important to understand is the fact that the 270 level is still extremely important, right? Until we can close above 270, to me, this whole move is still pretty irrelevant, and then being above the 21 EMA ever so slightly like we are is overall irrelevant. We have to be moving above $270 because then that plays out this double bottom pattern, and I think that's where we can shoot up to $280. So in other words, if we break 270 and start holding above it and don't just instantly collapse back below it, I do believe that opens the a pretty damn good possibility of moving up to about 275, potentially 280 as well. That's number two. Now, number three are going to be two new indicators. Well, no, one of them is not a new indicator. We just don't talk about it too much. But one of them is going to be a new indicator that TrendSpider has. I don't know if they just added it or I just saw them talking about it on the Twitter and I'm like, oh, that's cool. So I want to talk about it. Anyway, the first one I want to talk about is going to be this bad boy right here. So this is the one right here in the middle with these massive blue lines and some kind of yellow orangey lines at the bottom. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is as follows, right? So one thing I'm surprised about for Tesla is the fact that I am surprised that it's taking this long for Tesla to move essentially from this congestion period, right? Obviously, we're congesting after this massive fall from earnings. And, we can arguably be forming a bit of a potential bear flag. You can make an argument that it's kind of looking like, I don't know, something like this maybe even, right? You can kind of like put this line right here, right? Something like that. Just again, this is just very rough. And then you can put like this red line like right here. Something like this. Again, just a super rough example, right? But nonetheless, it is kind of, it's potentially showing us a bit of a bearish, a bear flag, potentially, right? Something like this, right? That's the pull and that's the flag pull, right? So just saying, keep that in mind. Obviously, it's not guaranteed, but, it does look like it has the definite signs of a bear flag. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because, like I said, we have been consolidating since earnings. And now this indicator right here is the BB/KC squeeze. Essentially, what it tells us is when a momentum movement is building. And usually what it does is it combines it with the Bollinger Bands, right? The Bollinger Bands are, whatever. The Bollinger Bands are kind of getting tighter a bit over here. You can see they're starting to slowly converge even more so as we're kind of just slowly consolidating throughout this area. And so you kind of combine these two factors, and what that does is, remember how I always say when bands get tighter and tighter, that usually means that it's like, that analogy or example that I use is like steam in a pot with no holes to escape. Eventually that steam will build up to the point where it'll just blow the top right off of the pot, and all the steam will have to go somewhere. That's kind of the same concept here when you have the Bollinger Bands kind of getting tighter and tighter and tighter. It's just that steam is building, and at some point it is going to release. Question is, of course, always to what side, and the more tighter and longer that it lasts, so the longer it's tight and the tighter it is for a longer period of time, if that makes sense, the more explosive the move will be. So combine that with this, and that's kind of what that's telling us. And if you look very closely, you can see it is building up a bit of a squeeze potential here. You can see, I believe, yeah. So you can see that whenever it forms these red lines, these red circles right here, you can kind of see, for the most part, they're usually green, right? Green is essentially like it's irrelevant. It means like nothing is squeezing, nothing is completely building up for massive move or anything like that. It's just kind of going as per usual, if that makes sense. Now, whenever you see these red circles instead of the green circles right here, the kind of middle part of each bar, sort of, that is usually the signs of a squeeze building up, if that makes sense, right? It means that the potential large move is on its way. And unfortunately, right now, the bar is, of course, pointing and getting larger to the downside. In other words, to me, what this is telling me is the fact that this indicator is expecting a large move and more than likely to the downside as well, which I think, if that were to happen, will pretty much take us to about $240 per share, right? But that's kind of what this one indicator is showing. Just keep that in mind. Obviously, it's just one indicator. It doesn't mean that this is the one, the one indicator to rule them all. Obviously, it can be wrong. You want to combine this with many other factors as well. But it is something to note, and it's expecting a massive move to the downside. Essentially, is what that is saying right now. And the final thing I want to talk about, or the final major thing I want to talk about. We talked about order blocks, but I want to talk about this, the TW pivot. This one's kind of interesting. So we're going to switch this all the way over to the monthly chart, right? This is where things get a little more interesting with this thing. I don't know why it's not showing it. Maybe it's supposed to be weekly? Maybe it's supposed to be weekly. Yeah, it's the weekly, I believe. But nonetheless, what this is showing us right here is going to be pretty interesting. So looking at the very bottom over here with this indicator, let me make sure you guys can see it. You can, perfect. Whenever you have, it's same concept of what we just saw, right? The bars going all the way up and the bars going all the way down. Whenever you have the bars going all the way down like this, it's kind of the opposite actually. When it's all the way down, that means that, that this is potentially a buy the dip opportunity. And also, especially when you have this kind of hollow, sort of light bluish bar right here, you can see, right? That's also saying that potentially is the bottom or very close to the bottom. And that's kind of what happened over here. You can see right here. It had that kind of, see-through a bar, if you will, right? The transparent bar, and that was kind of roughly the bottom area of this overall downward move. And then we had a beautiful rally from 210 all the way up to 310 pretty much, right? Beautiful 100-point move. Same concept applied over here, right? This one was a little bit early, right? It said the bottom was at 170, but then of course the whole Elon selling and everything, it was hard to predict. We had a massive move to the downside, but nonetheless, it was getting there. It had the right idea, right? And of course, since then we had a massive move up. To flip that, we also had a pretty, one of the bars all the way back here show up as well. This is, again, when you see this hollow bar, that means it's like extra important, right? But in other words, when you saw it over here, and it also showed it pretty much near the top of this move before Tesla had a massive fall all the way from $63 to $23, which is a pretty sizable move. You might be wondering, well, why didn't it show it all the way over here on these moves right here? And it's not always accurate. For instance, it had, it didn't show the transparent bar, but you can see the line got pretty damn high up over here, pretty close to where it does show it, the transparent bar as well, right? Maybe it was like one step away, but it was obviously wrong here because Tesla had a massive squeeze following that. But those are, in my opinion, slightly more unorthodox moves. For the most part, whenever it goes up to, when the bars get up this high, that usually means that we're close to a short-term top, and the vice versa is when the bars go very low, short-term bottom. Same thing over here. It never had the little transparent bar appear, but the lines got pretty damn low, right? And also ended up being a short-term bottom, and we had a massive move to the upside. So keep that in mind, right? Same thing over here, right? The bars got all the way to the top over here, you can see, and then that ended up being a short-term top, and we did get a bit of a fall from about 210 to about 140 or $50 per share. And now we're getting the same thing, except we also have that transparent bar. So keep that in mind, right? So take it for what it's worth. And this did happen on this level right here, pretty much when Tesla was around $285. So this to me tells me that, especially when we combine it with that, squeeze indicator that we literally just looked at, there's a lot of factors pointing at the fact that, we have most likely reached a short-term top, and we're probably going to be seeing some movement to the downside. On top of that, we also have Amazon and Apple earnings coming up this week, which is going to be, of course, market moving. So that's just, some indicators that I thought I'd mention that I haven't mentioned, especially this one that I just realized it even existed, which I think is a really nice one to have. But again, it is on a weekly time frame. It doesn't mean that it has to happen literally tomorrow or like even next week necessarily. It will take time for something like this to play out, right? It'll take like about a month, maybe even 2 months before, for instance, this move to play out and potentially set up another bottom potential as well, which I think it will. If it comes down to like the low 200s, I absolutely think this will set up a bottom signal as well on this indicator as well. But just keep that in mind, right? It is showing those signs as well of being a top area. Now, with that being said, as I said, this is of course, on the weekly time frame. So that doesn't mean that, it has to happen right away. For instance, I still believe that there is, if we break 270, a possibility to move up to 275, maybe even 280. I don't think that is out of the picture just yet. But with that being said, any movement we get to the upside, in my opinion for now, is nothing more than a very short-term bullish rally. And I mean short-term, because I do believe after that, whether we get that rally or not, whether we go up first and then down, or pretty much roughly from here and then straight down, I do believe that move down is still happening. I think at the very least, we'll revisit 240s, potentially low 200s, but at the very least, I think 240s should be still in play. I'm personally waiting for that. And again, if we get it, I will be buying that dip. Otherwise, I'm riding with what I got so far. But that's kind of what I am seeing. So let me know what you guys think down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. It does help a lot. And of course, as per usual, I'll see you for the next one. Peace.